Demons, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and with the Demons' comprehensive victory on Friday night, we have now occupied a spot inside the top four in every single round in back-to-back seasons, a feat that has not been achieved since the Bombers in 2000 and 2001. What a time to be a Demon fan. Joining me tonight to discuss the emphatic win in the Sunshine State is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Welcome to our listeners in Nairobi, Belgium and Kongwak. And a very big welcome as well to our very own Lord of the Loading Theory, the Baron of the Betting Markets, and our nominee for the nudie runs, the Bin Man.
Good evening, George. Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonlanders. And no, I'm a three-time nudie run champion and I've retired from that particular competition. It's a fantastic win, wasn't it? How awesome was it for you, Andy, being up there?
It was so good. I really was not expecting. I actually was quite confident that we would win, but I was not expecting the manner in which we did win, and it made it all the sweeter because I had a fantastic seats. I was smack bang in the centre of the ground, one level up. It's really close to the action, and I was just surrounded by Brisbane fans. I had a nice Melbourne supporting family in front of me. And I wasn't obnoxious because I wanted to get out of there alive. But it was just very, very sweet. And they were just shell-shocked. I don't think they realised just how far behind they probably are. And I think they realise that now. Tonight...
behind us. How far they are behind us. And I think we'll touch on that through the night.
We do.
I think that's a key caveat.
Yes, absolutely, and tonight we'll do our usual match wrap up before going into questions from our listeners. We'll touch on the Casey's final match and their first defeat for the season, and I guess we'll talk in general terms about the finals. But I think we'll save the in-depth preview of our qualifying final against the Swans with ins and outs and opposition watch and a more in-depth preview of the finals until next week's show. We do have a lot of questions and we'll get to them shortly. We did have a caller who called in just as we were going to the intro song. So if you want to call back, we'll get to you shortly. But before we we'll go with the match wrap up, and then we do have a voicemailer that we'll get to. So I'll once again, I was, as I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to travel interstate to witness the D's tear apart one of the contenders for our crown. And I must say, after 2 years of not being able to travel for footy, it's great to be able to get back to visit these interstate fortresses, and even better to come home with the 4 points. It was a beautiful, clear day on Friday. The temperature was a lovely, warm 27 degrees, so don't be jealous, all you guys stuck back in Melbourne. And despite having travelled to the Gappa a couple of times, I'd always travelled up from the Gold Coast and never actually taken in the city of Brisbane Vegas. And I must say that I was quite impressed, and I'm not sure if it was the warmth of the sun or the fact that I was flying solo, unfettered by work or kids. But Brisbane, the city, put on a magnificent show, but unfortunately their footy team couldn't deliver for their own fans. They were simply DOA, dead on arrival, as Cozzy nailed his second goal over 2 games in the space of about 30 seconds of actual game time. And the D's never looked back, playing with some of the flair of late 2021 that has only been glimpsed at times in 2022. At quarter time, we had a 5-goal lead, and by half time, that lead had been extended to a whopping 11 goals. Our defence was just superb and back to their impenetrable best, not only keeping another team down to under 60 points, but keeping the league's most potent team to under 60 points for the second time this season. And speaking of the second time this season, it was the second time this season that Michael Hibberd emptied his pockets at the end of the night, only to discover Charlie Cameron still stuck in there. Our generals in defence, May, Lever and Petty, had 21 intercepts and 15 spoils between them. And whilst the smaller defenders in Rivers, Hunt and Bowie moved the ball out of defence with ease, all showing composure to set up our scoring chains. Our forwards were on song and continue to show that we can in fact put on big scores with only one tall forward. Who's been calling for two tall forwards? I have no idea. I might be guilty of that. Cozzy was electric, booting 4 goals before halftime, whilst the Fritsch magnet booted 4 of his own. And a shout out to Bailey Fritsch for kicking 50 goals in consecutive years. He joins the likes of recent players in Bennett, Lyon and Nida to achieve that. And he was also the only AFL player this season to kick a goal in every single home and away game of the year. Despite getting battered and bruised, Big Benny Brown was able to shake it off and contribute 3 goals from 6 marks, and was instrumental in a few other scores with his ability to tap the ball to advantage to our small forwards. In the middle, it was a welcome sight to see our 2 big men dominate. Luke Jackson chalked up the highest percentage of hitouts to advantage that have been recorded from 2002 onwards, and that's a minimum of 15 hitouts in the game, with 70.6%. The previous highest percentage hitouts to advantage was 68.8% by Dean Brogan in 2006. The Demons Mids won the around the ground stoppage clearances 31-20. Best on ground, Clayton Oliver led the way with both Petraka and Brayshaw ably assisting. The Ds have no fear of travelling with our interstate streak now at 12 games running, just 3 games behind 2012 to 2014 Hawks, who are on 15. The Ds have beaten the Lions by a total of 122 points this season, and the Lions have only lost their other 5 games combined by 46 points. So they are our bunnies, so to speak. The Ds were seriously impressive and have put the rest of the competition on notice on the eve of the 2022 final series. This was a return of the team that struck fear into the opposition last September. Will they be able to parlay that form into this final series as they come up against the rest of the top 4, who all had the better of the Ds during the home and away series? Gentlemen, do you want to add any general comments before we go to our voicemailer and our questions from our listeners? Big man.
Just a general comment. I mean, our questions will cover off a fair bit of the game.
Yep.
Is that I'm amazed to some degree how little love there is for this win. I mean, I'm looking through the lens of Demonland, obviously, and there's a fair bit of love, but there also seems to be a fair bit of ambivalence, both on Demonland and in the media. From my perspective, that is one of the most impressive halves of football in my whole time that I've ever followed Melbourne. I mean, the grand final was obviously won, but that wasn't even a full half. Really, that was half of the third quarter and half of the final quarter. But from beginning to end, I can't think of a more impressive performance in terms of scoreboard and the way we played. And it'll come up probably through the show at different points. But I just wanted to make a point about our first half against Collingwood. Our first half against Collingwood was not far behind this half, and we kicked 12-7 that night. And what were we at halftime this week? Our accuracy was so much better, and that was the difference in combination with the fact that Collingwood took their chances.
13-3.
13-3 to 12-7 in that Pies game. In that Pies game, the Pies were ridiculously high percentage, so 8 goals from 17 inside 50s in that first half. We completely shut them out, except their ability to score. And if you look at their scores since Collingwood, their accuracy has been nowhere near. It's been nowhere near that was that night. So, not wanting to rehash that game, but I just think it's important to look at those two, together in a way, because it was equally impressive in that first half everywhere but the scoreboard against Collingwood. Almost equally impressive, but we were incredible in this match. And, there was an elimination final, I think 87, which was phenomenal when we flogged, is it Sydney? I think we beat
North first, then Sydney.
North, that was close, but for a big game, that was as impressive a performance as you're going to get. And I think we're all a little bit spoiled from the finals last year if we think that we're not blown away by that, really.
George?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Bin Man. People shouldn't underestimate this game and what we achieved in it. Brisbane's record in the last 4 years at home, they've had 35 wins and 2 losses. It's just incredible. We've now given them their third loss in the last 4 years. It's just amazing. I think it's also worthwhile reflecting on what Simon Goodwin said after the game, where he said, "Tonight was the first time we've been able to deliver finals type football. We've been building this for 6 to 7 weeks, and we've seen exactly with the results from this game what that means." All around the ground, it was just simply incredible. The backs were incredible. Bowie with 5 intercepts, Hibbert 4, May 6, Lever 9, Hunt 9, Petty 6, Rivers 5, 44 intercepts in total amongst our backs 6 and 7. It's just incredible numbers. And when you're watching it on the television, Andy watching it live, would have seen that the systems and the fluidity all of a sudden was back with the players on the field. They were running, overlap, pumping it deep forward. The forwards got a very early lesson from Jake Lever on how to kick straight, and they followed it up for the rest of the night. Ben Brown in particular had 3 goals, which, when you want your full forward to nail one, he nailed them beautifully for it. The efforts of Cozzy and Fritsch were remarkable again. The numbers, when you look at for inside 50s for goal, Melbourne had 2.7. For every 2.7 inside 50s, we scored a goal. Brisbane's was 7.25. It's just, the numbers are just off the charts what we were doing to them. The rebound 50s, 50 to 31, just incredible again. Disposals per goal, Melbourne 18, Brisbane 43. So it was direct, it was ruthless football, and we really put them to the sword in a big way. Don't forget, Brisbane were in the top 4. They're fighting for a position there, and we've ripped them apart. So, a truly remarkable effort. Don't discount it by any stretch of the imagination. We're back to our best, and I think, and Ben Mann will probably talk about it a bit later on, our best is a lot better than the most of the rest of the people who are sitting in the top 8. So get ready for the ride, Demon fans.
Absolutely. I mean, they were 2 up at half time in inside 50s. Now, I don't know what the number, as I said last week, the Ds really value forward half footy, so do Lions. So how much percentage in time in half? If you watch their board, when they come out at quarter and 3/4 time, it's one of the 4 things they have as their priority. Contested ball was another. We got out after 6 or 7 minutes of the first quarter, we were already 11 up in contested possession. They wasted all of their energy on that ridiculous aggression that they came out with, targeting players as if that was going to rattle us. And we poured our energy into winning the football. What was interesting, though, is that the end of the game was only 10, and it oscillated between it. I think it only went, there was as low as a 5 differential, but it oscillated for the entire match from that 6 or 7 minute mark between about 5 and 10 contested possession. So Brisbane were incredible, in fact, in their ability to keep hard at the contest, and they ended up winning the inside 50 count by 8 by the end of the match. Their performance was pretty impressive in a lot of ways, Brisbane, despite what the commentary about it is, and by extension downplaying us. And you mentioned Goody's post-match comments, George. I posted on Deanland during the week. On the Thursday, he had his his pre-game presser. And it caught my attention when he said, quote, they feel physically fresh. They feel ready to go. Speaking about the players, obviously. They feel physically fresh. They feel ready to go. We feel like we've been able to build some cohesion in the way we play in the last 4 or 5 weeks. When I read that and heard him say that, I thought, right, okay, I know what he's talking about here. We're going to come out and we're going to do what we did, which is run in waves, get that surge going, and we look a completely different team when we're at our physical optimal best. And what's exciting is we're probably pretty close now to our physical optimal readiness, but we've probably got a little bit more, we're not fully wound up, so we've probably got a little bit more, maybe another half gear or gear that we can go up. So just an incredible performance, and I really find it a bit frustrating that more people aren't talking about what an incredible performance is, and the narrative seems to be, is it more Melbourne or is it more about how poor Brisbane were?
Well, we've got a question I know later on about that, so we'll get to that shortly. If you do want to join us tonight, 03 9016 3666, 03 9016 3666, or you can Skype us, Demonland31. We will answer the call on mute and get to you when we can. We have one of Demonland poster AF was kind enough to call in. He left a message for us, so I'll play that message now, and then I'll get the boys their answers to that question. Here is AF.
Hello, boys. It's AF here, struggling with a little bit of laryngitis. Love the Potters. Great work. Just had a quick question in regards to finals and how we may approach that. Positive Binners has talked a little bit about the idea of going really fast against the Bulldogs in the first half and Collingwood, and seeing if we can blow them away. Do we think that'll be the strategy in finals, or do we just sort of see if it's a more contested style where we can't go as fast without conceding? Just wanted your thoughts on that, and go Redleggers.
Big man, that's a perfect one for you to take. And as well, you might want to answer, did we do that against Brisbane, where we use that strategy against Brisbane and try and get a big pull on a big score early?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the modus operandi. That's the model. Jags with the model last year, but I think the difference is that whether we continue to do it, I think we will, but there's no doubt in my mind that was the strategy against Brisbane, and it was certainly the strategy against Collingwood as well. They did it against the Dogs. The difference between the Dogs game, though, I think, in this game and the Pies game is that they went, my feeling is in the model is to get us a match-winning lead up to halftime and then hold from that point on. The first 10 minutes of the third quarter against the Pies, we trapped it in our forward half, and it looked like a Melbourne match. And the same for this game of footy. Now, there was a bit of talk about, the second half and the slowdown. There are a couple of things. One is that I think it fits with that model, is that we get a match winning lead, and then it becomes really problematical for the opposition because they then have to make a choice. How do they get back from, say, a 5-6 goal deficit at half time? Do they change their approach? Do they go more aggressive? That means that they have to think about what they do. I absolutely think that's the strategy of putting I think they tried to do that in the grand final last year. They came out hard. They caught the Dogs on the hop. We did that here, and we did some similar things, and we'll probably touch on them through, but there was some clear, interesting tactical tweaks that disrupted Pagan's thinking, I think. The second half in this game was a little bit unusual, but I think people are underestimating, one, I think that's the model, but two, the smart play was to go slow the game in the second half, because if you want to maximise your percentage, as anyone who followed the St Kilda Swans game, is you want the opposition to be scoring as less as possible. So if we'd kept on trying to score fast in that second half, we were from, again, goodies about the probability and what's the percentage play. The percentage play is to play slow in that second half to reduce their score as much as possible. That was the way to maximise our percentage boost. Bar for those two late goals, it worked a treat. One of that last goal was really unlucky. I didn't think that free was there, and it could have gone either way. But nonetheless, it was a smart play to go slow in that second half. So short answer, yes, I think that is our model. And yes, I do think that we'll attack the finals in the same way. We'll look to come out of the blocks hard against the Swans and make it very hard for them to get back into the game.
Anything you want to add, George, before we go on?
Yeah, the only things I'd add would be that when you hit finals, apart from that first week, effectively for that top four, everything else is cutthroat. There's you're either in it to win it on that particular day, and the idea is to get as far in front, because then the opposition have got to throw caution to the wind and take risks, because there is no next week for most of the teams in the top eight. So that style of play, when Goody talks about playing finals football, that's what it's all about. It's about winning very early in the game and doing it to the extent that the opposition struggle to come back. The other thing is that whoever's in the 8, you're playing against teams that have generally got good contested ball winners in there, and you need to impose yourself pretty early on to overcome the opposition. It's exactly what we did in this Brisbane game. It's exactly what we did in last year's grand final. You impose yourself very early on, and the opposition are worried about what you possibly can do to them whenever you wish. So, it will be a tactic that we'll employ. But then so are most of the other teams going to try to do the same sort of thing because, like I said, there's no second chances in finals.
They are, but the advantage we've got, we saw in the prelim last year, and we saw in the grand final, obviously, we saw in this match, is our ability to generate that wave running and that full-on pressure across every single line is the best in the AFL. I don't care what people say about Collingwood. When we get numbers at the ball, one of the things, I watched the replay straight away after that game, and I've watched it the first half again, is to randomly stop, pause it. If you're watching, if you can pause it, and count how many players, Melbourne players, are around the ball at any given time whenever the ball stops or is in contest. It's so often right from the beginning of the game, we were outnumbering them at contests. And when Melbourne do that, and the other thing that we did is when Melbourne do that and add the offensive ability that we did, is that we tilted the risk-reward dial towards risk in that first quarter, and we took more risks. We went more centrally. We took more options, kicking to the top of the square, not the pockets. And that's the way to take advantage of that. I mean, it helps obviously to kick accurately. Just good kicking is good football, and you can't underestimate it. I mean, imagine how different that Collingwood game would have been if we kicked accurately in that first half and took our chances, and we did in this first half of footy. Just awesome display of kicking.
Just before we go on to the listeners' questions, do you think we did go out very hard in terms of increasing our percentage so we would get that home final? Do you think that was a consideration in our mind, knowing we had to sort of win by a certain amount?
No, I don't think so. No, I think that's the model. I think the model that they've landed on is to blitz early, blitz hard, throw the opposition's planning around. Look at the big games we've played in the last. This was a big game. Obviously, the prelim and the qualifying final last year and the grand final. You look at the way we've gone about it. We have blitzed at the beginning, and then the other team has had to play catch up tactically, catch up in effort. I mean, that's what Brisbane did. Brisbane really did fantastic to level up those contested ball numbers, and they also had to adjust to some of the tactical tweaks that Goody threw at them, and we might talk about that a bit later, that sort of theme that we've had all year about predictability. The good thing about predictability is that when you're unpredictable, you throw a spanner in the opposition's sort of tactical thinking. And that's exactly what happened. There were so many examples. One of the best examples of it was the goal that Fritter got after that lead straight up the middle, which all the people who've been wanting, the forward to lead up leading channel would have loved it. But part of that was created because you could see what happened from the down the ground shot. Hodge even talked about the confusion of Daniels and the other defender, was that they were looking to cover the pocket, because 9 times out of 10, that's where Melbourne kicked to it. And they completely lost their ability to hand over to cover Fritter because their mind wasn't on the job. Plus, they've got a defensive weakness that we've talked about often enough. They don't have a sophisticated modern defensive system that should have blocked that lane. But nonetheless, they were not expecting a kick to the corridor. They were expecting a kick to the pocket.
All right, we have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Who am I talking to?
You're talking to Murdoch 516 from the forums.
Hey, Murdoch, how you going?
Yeah, not too bad. I think I'm the first time caller. I can't remember calling in before, but it's an honour to be here.
Pleasure to have you. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. More of a statement to get your thoughts on it. Are we talking about our future opponents tonight, or is that next week time?
It's probably for next week. If that's all you've got, ask it. We can talk it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it was more on the point that kind of Bin Man just brought up about predictability and how I guess in a lot of our losses this year, we haven't changed a lot up, and we've kind of been beaten without, I guess changing our tactics or changing our team selection around too much. It's been a lot of the same all year, and then heading into finals with our future opponents. Obviously, Sydney beat us earlier in the year. So I was just wondering, in terms of going into the finals, obviously T-Mac is a potential in. I think last time we played Sydney, we didn't have Melksham playing. I believe Hunt was playing. I don't think Bowie was playing. Do we think we're going to make many changes from the team that played at Brisbane this week? Or do you reckon we just play it safe and maybe just go with the same 22 that played Brisbane? Or do we bring in Salem? Do we bring in McDonald? Maybe do we drop Melksham, or do we keep him in? Just want to get you guys' thoughts.
B-Man, I'll let you take it. Don't go too much into it because we will be talking about this next week. So you just give some surface thoughts.
Well, working backwards, that I think that the other comment that Goody was really stressing during the week was the importance of cohesion, and I thought that was a really interesting insight into his philosophy about coaching. Is that cohesion is so critical from both team synergy, but because he is such a system-based coach, is that you can't be chopping and changing. So the short answer is I can't see there'll be many changes at all. Salo probably comes back. In terms of the predictability and what we might do against the Swans, before during the week I'd posted on Demonland that there was a really similar discussion criticising Melbourne's predictability this time last year. There was a big theme about it, that we always kicked at the same spot, yada, yada, yada. So the same conversation came up this year. But come the preliminary final, remember we talked about this year is about what tweaks he might bring into the finals. Come the preliminary final and grand final, we definitely went, for instance, more central with our inside 50 kicks. And as I say, move that risk-reward dial towards risk a bit more. And that's one of the advantages of being predictable, because the opposition do all their planning around their systems, their structures, their tactics, to counter what we do. And if we do the same thing all the time, they're going to respond accordingly. Meaning if we suddenly become unpredictable, we can catch them out, which is what we did in the grand final, because we got to jump on the Dogs. And I reckon partly that was because we did something a bit different with our inside 50 entries. The Dogs, who like to have their, the man in front, they were thrown out a bit. Their defensive structure was thrown out of whack, and they took some time to balance up. And exactly the same thing happened in this game. Brisbane, their defence is a bit of a rabble at the best of times, so it's the Dogs for that matter. But they could not organise their back six properly in this game, and partly because we were unpredictable. We were suddenly going to the top of the square. We were going in, cutting laterally. We were much more aggressive with our inside 50s. But there was an even better example of the advantage of unpredictability, which was the goal that set up Cozzie's match-winning goal, because the Blues fully expected us to be going down the line, and we obviously knew that, and so we planned a setup that looked to create an outnumber in the corridor, and then Lever didn't even hesitate to go around his body and kick laterally into that corridor, knowing that we'd have an outnumber, which they'd organised. But that was because they knew that the Blues would set up down the line to protect it down the line, the kick. And that's 100% what they no doubt expected us to do. And we talked after that match also that the way Hunt didn't kick it to the pocket and kicked it 20 metres out. Well, they would have been expecting him to kick it to the pocket, because 9 times out of 10, that's what we do. But we didn't. And we did the same thing in that this match. So, the other example during the Geelong game was everyone criticising Goody for not responding to their tactic of putting Blickharves, or whatever his name is, in front of him in front of Max Gawn and that kick from May. Well, the advantage of not responding is Scott. We know Scott might try that in the finals if we play them. Scott doesn't know how we'll respond in the finals. And there was another example of the predictability, which I thought was hilarious, actually, is that, Goody plays a pretty straight bat. I wouldn't want to play poker against him, but Harms to Neil everyone was talking about Harms to Neil, and I heard Chaplin interviewed before the game on SEN. Basically, Jones asked him about it, and he didn't actually say yes, Harms to Neil, but he said, "Oh, Jonesy, you know how we play. Yeah, you're right." And we look to actually not tag him hard. We look to exploit his defensive work and stop him on offense. But then what happens? Brayshaw goes to him, and I thought it was a brilliant tactical move because unusually Harms went to Bailey. And Bailey's critical to the way they move the ball from stoppages. He's really super important to the way they score and get it away from stoppages. So I thought that was a really clever move, and it plays on that predictability because they were expecting certain things to happen. Pagan was clearly expecting certain things to happen, and I thought it took a while to get his stuff together to tactically respond to what we were doing.
This isn't the 90s. It was Fagan, not Pagan.
Fagan. Yes, great, good point.
Murdoch, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that was a great answer. I'll get off the line now so you can continue your pod.
Thank you. Thanks, Murdoch. Appreciate the call. George, did you want to add anything there? I wasn't sure if you were indicating.
No, not really. I'll just go back to what Bimman said before, or what Goodwin said before, was this is the first time that we've been able to do it this season. He's not going to change from his winning finals type football formula. So I don't think we'll see much in the way of changes from personnel, but we'll talk about that next week.
All right, and that we will. But everyone, welcome to call in 039016 3666 039016 3666. You can Skype us on Demonland31. Let's keep to questions about this past game because we will do a preview of the finals and the Swans game next week. Let's get to listeners' questions. Demonland poster RPFC, he says the age-old unanswerable question was that more about the opposition than us? And I think we sort of answered this, but you can go into it. I think that it does say more about the Lions, but nevertheless, it was a great habit to get into, to lead into space more and lower our eyes more and be more patient. They are obviously running in waves and fitness is very high. Utilising that gave it to the they gave it to the runner laterally a few times, and they also kicked it better with less blazing away. Now, Nairobi Demon, he adds, like RPFC, and without discrediting the performance of the boys, I'd be grateful for your thoughts on the extent to which the result hinged on their performance or our top-notch performance. More specifically, did they try but fail to execute strategies that other teams have used successfully against us? Or were we able to negate those strategies this time because of our improving fitness and or counter strategies? Or did they simply not try any of those strategies, such as moving the ball fast through the middle, 45-degree kicks, lowering the eyes, etc.? My sense is that we shouldn't get too carried away. Finals against Geelong, Sydney, Collingwood and Richmond will be much tougher than last Friday night. And what I say is that I was at the ground, and it was quite noticeable that the Lions rarely switched or went into the corridor. They would often fall into our trap and slow play it, and then we were all set up, and we know how the story ends for most of teams that play that way against us. A few times they did move the ball quickly and use the corridor, and they actually sometimes scored from that or put themselves into a position to score, but that was quite rare. They simply didn't play the way that some of the other contenders that we've come up against have, and at no time were I didn't think we were under the immense pressure that we have been in some of our losses. So were we just good or were they simply just bad? It's hard to say. B-Man, I know you've got your own thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I just think it's a completely false narrative, and I'm surprised that these fans are running with it. I'm not surprised the media are, but it's bloody frustrating. I mean, there's barely a noise about, during the week. It's just really frustrating because they played better than Collingwood did in that first half. They were awesome in many ways. And, I mean, it was amazing watching Neil. I watched his work at the centre bouncers is just unbelievable, phenomenal. They've got, as I said, they never dropped their head. We got out to 11 clearance differential after about 10 minutes, and then it was 8 at the end of the match. They kept on coming all day. I think their defensive weakness was shown up, but the thing about what other teams can do, they were trying to go through the middle. They were trying to go fast. That's the point about being at optimal level of fitness, which, just to bang on about it again, we haven't been at that level before. That's the first time we've been anywhere, close, probably since round 6 or 7, to our optimal fitness compared to last year's finals. And you saw what happened. We ran in numbers, and that makes it look like offensively, we've got more options because we do, and we've got more free players inside 50, so our scoring ratio is going to go up. We were aggressive with our ball movement in terms of where we kicked it, so our ratio was going up. But even things like the banana at the end of the second half, and Cozzy's Brown at the second half, and Cozzy in the first half, the fact that they're fitter and fresher enables them to be able to execute their skills better. Everything works better when they're fitter and fresher, including execution. I think one of the myths is that other teams are going to do this much better than Brisbane were, which is get through the corridor and switch. We just simply didn't allow them. And one of the things I really liked about the coverage actually was there were a lot of high shots and a lot of down the ground shots, and you could really see the advantage that we were getting from the incredible defensive spread, but also the running. If you look at that goal that Cozzy kicked, where Langdon hit it back to him, that started in their defence. Both those players are on the half-back flank. They both ran the length of the ground. That was in the first quarter, and 4 or 5 other Melbourne players were running parallel with them at that same time. Cozzy and Langers both had a direct opponent on them at the start of that contest. Neither of those opponents could go with them, and were gassed by the end, could keep up, and we got Langer tapping it to Langers tapping it to Cozzy. That's just phenomenal running. So I really push back against the narrative that it's Brisbane.
All right. Lord Nev asks, I wouldn't mind a bit of analysis around our clearance quality and forward structure / efficiency since we put Jacko in the middle more and Gawn forward. Not 100% sold yet on Gawn as a forward, although that's maybe due to the goal kicking more than anything else. But since Jacko has gone into the ruck, it seems we've got back a bit of that bang, 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 bang. Gus could be an influence in that too, maybe given his clearance numbers. It's also a possibly a preview to how we would set up next year should Grundy come across. George, you want to?
Well, there's a lot of conjecture in that one, isn't there? Look, I think with the thing that we're seeing with Jackson, and it ties in nicely with Bin Man's loading theories, is everyone forgets that this is a 20-year-old kid. He's in his virtually. He's a kid. He's been playing AFL football for 2 years, barely 2 years. He's finally got to the stage where, with the loading and the pressures, he's starting to feel good with himself. He's taking marks again. It's the same with Gawn. All of a sudden in this game, this was again another one of Goodwin's sort of left field things, is Jackson's doing the ruck right from the start because he's fit, athletic and ready to go. And he absolutely jumped all over McInerney. McInerney the previous week virtually won the game for them. Whereas in this week, McInerney was almost completely nullified. It started with Jackson right from the very first bounce. So we're seeing a lot more quick movement and athleticism. How many clearances did Jackson get? It was an incredible number to match up his hit outs to advantage.
And I thought that's where he really jumped McInerney, wasn't it? Once the ball hit the deck, it was like McInerney. It
was all over. Yeah, so it's not surprising, when you get those sort of that sort of extra clearance out of the middle, that you see the results down the forward line. I'm not still sold on the idea of resting rucks down there. I don't think it's produced the results necessary. It certainly terrifies the opposition having someone who's 208 centimetres standing in front of them. And what do you do if the ball does come down? But what's coming out of the middle has been far more impressive, and putting Brayshaw in there as well has been an additional fillip to the midfield, because his numbers in the last couple of weeks have been off this chart as well. Petrarca's starting to find a little bit of sort of finding his way more down the forward line. Again, very challenging for opposition defenders. So, it's all coming together really nicely. But, I'd certainly keep playing Jackson the way they're playing him at the moment, and which replicates exactly what happened in the grand final, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting, George, because I think partly there's a couple of factors. Maxi, as we've talked about, looked a bit, like he's carrying, niggles, like probably they all are. But Maxi going down forward mitigates a bit against not having the second 12, doesn't it? So that's clearly part of it. But again, even if T-Mac does come back in, the advantage now that Goody's got is that he can play. The predictable one is now about 50-50 split for Jackson. He can suddenly tweak it and have 70% max if that's working, doing ruck work, if that's working better. But I think you make a really good point about, his ability to follow up after the ball hits the ground. There are a couple of unbelievable examples, including that one where he picked it up on the boundary line after the ruck in Jackson. It's just for a big fella. I mean, the other good point you make is his age. I mean, I'm guilty of, thinking his forward craft needs a fair bit of work. But my mate keeps reminding me, well, he's a kid. He's only a couple of years older than Darcy, who looked like a fair player, but, a few years away from his strength. So he's got plenty of time to learn his forward craft and become a gun forward. And, I'm hoping he stays, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, who's he playing for when he learns all that? Hopefully it's us. Lefty says, just wanted to get your thoughts on Harms's return to the side and his match. Do you think he is best 22?
No, I do. JJ was real tough out. I think it was really a matchup in the end, is that, as it turned out, not Neil, it was Bailey. I like his aggression.
And Bailey's always killed us, mind you.
Bailey's
in every
always
game
killed us.
we play.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's best 22. He's good when he's got a role. His aggression is good. He's not doing silly things. In the heat of the kitchen, he's an important player. It was really tough on JJ though, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's going to find. Go ahead, George.
He's the player you need in finals, isn't it? That grunt player.
Yeah,
just a role player, someone who can come in and you don't necessarily need him in the middle at bounce ups, but you do need him around the ground. When it's all in contested ball situations. So, and it's not just the tagging; he's actually getting his own ball. That's the important thing. Taggings have got limited use, particularly against very good players. But it's not just whether he beat Bailey; he got his own ball as well. So that's really, really critical.
And I thought Chaplin's comments about that, I've heard sort of variations on that same theme, but he essentially paraphrasing what he said is they don't tag anymore. What they look to limit. If it's Neil, they look to limit, and the same would be true of Bailey. How much hurt he can do on offense, but look to what was really a big, interesting comment I thought was they look to exploit them on offense, which suggests that there's something to exploit there. Which sort of another related thought is there's often the talk about mitigating the opposition's strengths when in tactically, and what do you do about Melbourne's strengths, or what do you do about Brisbane's strengths? I think just as important is taking advantage of their weaknesses, and that sort of taking advantage of or looking to hurt Neil and a player like Bailey on offense speaks to a defensive weakness, their ability to run defensively, and the way that we brought the ball inside 50 and our unpredictability compared to how we normally play really exploited the Lions' weak defensive system, I thought, and in particular I thought made a mess of Andrew's reputation personally. He had a shocker.
Yeah, and Daniel Rich as well. They depend so much on him moving the ball up the ground, and Pickett took him apart, quite frankly.
It was so ineffective, Rich, wasn't it, for one of the most influential players? And you watch, they'll come out and win next week, the following week, and, you'll think, how could that happen? And so I think that's, I think that it's partly about exploiting their weaknesses, and they've got a few, clearly got a few.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they do actually beat the Tigers, just as an insurance policy if we do happen to lose. We'll talk more about that a bit later. We've got about 70 live listeners, so that's fantastic. If you do want to give us a call, 03 9016 3666, or you can Skype us on Demonland31. Radelaide asks, I'm ashamed to admit that I had ridden off both the Pig and Milkshake and didn't think they'd feature at all this year, but their performances, Pig especially since his return from injury, and Milk in the past few weeks, have been exemplary. I know that members of the esteemed panel have been critical of Melksham in the past, as I and many have been too. Have your opinions changed? Well, for me, definitely. I thought Melksham definitely wouldn't be playing this year, and I wasn't thrilled when he got picked, but so far he's changed the way he's played. He's now a bit of a role player. They're giving him a role each week, whether he's taking the the intercept marker, he's being a bit being a bit more physical in the forward line. I really enjoy his role. Pig, I thought his best days might have been over when he had the calf injury, but he's come back. He's just been sensational. He's taking those small forwards apart. We'll talk next week about who he takes next week. Fantastic, George.
Yeah, exactly the same feelings. Melksham, I think, has changed his game in the last probably 4 weeks. Looking at him when he first came back into the side, he was trying to play the old Melksham way. Out the back, the cheap type kicks. Now he's tackling, which we've been calling for. He's putting the pressure on the ball carrier. He's running as well.
And he's handing off handballs as well.
He's looking for other options in the forward line. So he's playing exactly what he needs to do to get into a grand final type side, which I think is a big inspiration for him. Hibbert, likewise. I didn't think he'd come back from a calf injury, given his age. It's a sign of being on the slow decline, so to speak. But he has been fantastic. He's not just blanketed, people like Cameron, for example, but his strength in that one-on-one contest that occurs every now and again when all else has failed, he seems to be able to stand up, and then his solid left foot to just get the ball out of the 50-metre arc is critical at times. It doesn't matter where it finishes up, just get it out so the rest of the defence can set up. So he's been fantastic, and he's not going anywhere at the moment. I thought he'd be surely retiring at the end of the season, but I can't see any reason that he should at the moment, the way he's playing.
Yeah, I concur with all of that. It was interesting, speaking about Chaplin again before the game in that interview, he was asked about Hibbert going to Cameron, and he confirmed that one. So that happened, that one. But interestingly, he said that what they like about him on Cameron, apart from the fact that he does a good job, is that Cameron likes to lead up high up to the half forward line, and that gets Hibbo up to the half back line. Where he can run off, we didn't actually say run off, where he can do some damage off the halfback flank, which to me, I heard run off Cameron, which again, I think is a bit of a weakness. If Cameron's not scoring goals, he doesn't give enough defensive pressure, and he doesn't gut run up the ground like Cozzy does, or even someone like Brown does. On Melksham, he's just been fantastic, and he's doing exactly what we called for in 2020 when he got dropped. And 21 as well, his intensity is just brilliant. And he looks like a player on a mission, like he's desperate to keep his spot. Now that he's settled in the team, and like I said a couple of weeks ago, that he looked a bit unsure of himself. He looks more confident of himself to go for things. He's a supremely talented footballer, kicks on both sides of his feet, got good hands, he's good over his head. In this game, it was interesting because he didn't really have a defensive role as much this one, because Andrews would normally be the player, but he didn't seem to have that role so clearly. He was more of an offensive threat. And just finally, the other thing I love about Melksham, to be honest, is I'm loving his aggression, and he's standing up for teammates, and he's in there, and he doesn't take a backward step, does he? And his body language has been fantastic. It's something I've criticised him for in the past. So I'm super impressed with both those players. And I mean, Hibbo, his effort to touch that ball, I forget the kick, he really got up there, and I thought to myself, pigs can fly, can't they? So he's just been brilliant. And as you say, George, I really love his ability to swivel off one foot and kick and he's even kicking a bit better on his right foot, but just to clear the zone. He's sort of got a funny scooping action, but he gets it out of there a lot when we're under pressure.
He didn't, just to refresh my memory, he didn't play in the qualifying final last year. That's Cameron did kick 4 goals, I think 3 in the first quarter.
Smith was
on him, and then I think Smith got injured. Hibbert came in for the prelim, so right place, right time. Bigfoot asks, love the podcast, look forward to it every week. My question, Salem's late withdrawal gave Jake Bowie an opportunity to remind us what he can bring to the side. He's a calm presence down back and has a great kick. Obviously, Salem is best 22, but what does this mean for our lucky charm? Demon WA adds, keen to hear you all discuss the backline makeup in this game and moving forward. Salem's withdrawal didn't seem to affect us all that much, with Rivers in particular playing with some noticeable dare and dash. I assume Salem must come back in, so there will be a finals hard luck story in the backline again this year by the looks. El Diablo also adds about that. I also wanted to ask, what do you make of Salem's place in our list? Is he really a lock at the moment? I felt our half backline was more dynamic without him last week. Controversial comments for sure there. I can't see how Salem can't get back in the team. I know he got injured in the first game, missed a whole chunk of the season. He's come back. It took him a while to sort of find his feet. He started getting a bit of penetration in his kick. He hasn't been brilliant like he was last year, but we know what a skillful player he is. He's copped the injury now. I'm assuming he will be back in 2 weeks' time. What does our backline look like? Is Jake Bowie going to be unlucky? George?
Yeah, that's the big $64 million question for the selectors next week. It's a nice position to be in, but look, we'll talk about it more next week. But look, Salem's the best 22. He's our best kick in the side. I can't see him not being there. Unfortunately, that's going to mean that someone's going to miss out. Jaden Hunt is doing exactly what Melcham's doing at the other end of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
There's a finals position and potentially a grand final slot available if you continue to play the way you're doing. I think Hunt's cottoned onto the idea that you're a defender first now. And in this game, he had an incredible 9 intercepts. It's just exactly what we've been calling for. He's not going anywhere at the moment. Bowie came in as a last-minute replacement, and he played well. He still did his job, what was needed. But the selectors are going to have a very difficult decision, and there's going to be someone who's going to be very disappointed. So we just have to wait and see.
Big man.
Yeah, I thought you could not give our defensive system or defensive unit more credit. I mean, it was phenomenal. I mean, just again, they got 8 more inside 50s than us in a game of footy, and we won that game by 54 points or whatever it was. I mean, incredible performance by the back 7. And they, the stuff around the thumping the chest, the Wolf of Wall Street, Jones was talking about that before the game, and that was the theme. He asked Chaplin about what the theme was, and that was the theme, the Wolf of Wall Street. And apparently it came out in the finals last year. Goody has themes for big matches, and Wolf of Wall Street was one. The thumping of the chest is a scene in the movie. And it was interesting because Jones was also, they interviewed May afterwards, was asking about it, but was asking Chaplin. It was a bit cheeky by Jones, I thought, but what's the total? What's the number? Because it was 67 points to keep in some game in a final last year, to keep the opposition under 67. And if they keep them under 67, that's where the thumping of the chest comes in. He put May on the spot after the game, Jones, and the answer for this was, he directly asked him what was the number. What was the number they had to keep him under for you to all thump your chest, and it was 60. So I thought that was really interesting insight into Goody's coaching, but also how critical the defense is. So, you would have heard during the week the pushback against our criticism of our offense. I heard one of the coaches come out and say, well, look, where I think he said 9th on the table for offense since the bye. And the defense is our focus. And so they came into the game aiming to keep the opposition under 60 points. May said that was huge. He didn't think it was going to be possible. They're the best offensive team in the AFL. You would have heard a number of people say that. So to keep that team on a perfect night to 57 points is just phenomenal. And, they all deserve a huge credit for the pressure they absorbed. But a special shout out to Hunt. That was the best game of footy he's played for the club in a long time, I reckon. Super valuable, right, consistent from the get-go. I just love it when players improve weaknesses in their game, and his kicking, his touch has been beautiful in the Pies game. The Blues game less so, but he was good in that last quarter. But some of his touch kicking and not wading it into space and allowing players to run onto it was just fantastic, because it's obviously a pretty hard skill to do when you're running flat out like he is. I thought he was terrific.
The other one that needs to be recognised is Rivers, who got a special mention from Stephen May in his interview. That one of the things that I particularly noticed in this was the return of that overlap running that he provides off that half-back line, and it is absolutely lethal what he's capable of doing. He picks the ball up at that half-back line, slides around through the middle, and then thumps it right forward. It completely sets the opposition defenders at ill ease. So, big credits to him. So you sort of go, Rivers is performing well, Hunt's performing well, Hibbert's performing well. Petty, Lever and May aren't going anywhere. And
Jakey Bowie comes into the team and he plays a good game.
And he plays well as well, Nice problem to have. But,
Really, it was fortuitous to a degree, because when Salem came out and I heard, it was late, wasn't it? It was only a couple of hours before the game, and I heard Bowie. I mean, you couldn't ask for a more... for a better swap for someone as good as Salem as Bowie. He's essentially come in and played exactly the same role. And I actually, I think of course, Salo's best 22 and he'll come back in and, probably for Bowie, you'd think. But we didn't lose anything, did we, by having Bowie? I thought Bowie's pace also he seemed a bit quicker. His aggression for anyone, but particularly for a, smaller player like him. I thought he had a terrific game, and we didn't lose anything by having Salo out, which is a credit to their system, but it's a credit obviously to our depth and Bowie.
We have another caller on the line. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to? I apologise. I had you on mute. Who am I talking to?
It's Time.
It's Time. How are you?
Well, gentlemen, nice to speak to you again, and on a happy occasion.
Yes, likewise.
I wanted to switch down for a quick discussion down the other end. I've got down to the forwards. I've got two things I wanted to put to you guys as a question and some as a statement. The question, which you can get to afterwards, is, how is it we discuss these games, we analyse them, we think we know a bit about footy, but boy, are there some imponderables. Like, how is it that suddenly after a half a season where we seem to have lost a lot of our ball movement, and we went from being number one, I think, in the first 8 rounds to ending up being, 17th, and then suddenly we switch on something that we look like we have no idea how to do the week before against lowly Carlton. There's some things that from week to week just go, and then they come, and it's taken weeks for it to come back, and it was spectacular in that game. The question I'd like to put is how, what's the theory behind where we find the ability to switch that on? That's one question. The other one is, I went to the Collingwood. I happened to be in Melbourne. Went to the Collingwood Carlton game yesterday. And one thing I'll say about that is that what's very clear about Collingwood, and it was clear against us as well, is efficiency inside 50, and how well, when they move the ball, they deliver it inside 50 with low kicks to passes, and how efficient that makes them. And we did a lot more of that, I thought, against Brisbane. But it really is clear from Collingwood and what they've achieved this year that that's one of their biggest strengths, because their differentials in most of the key differentials that we would regard as critical to our game plan in terms of contested possessions, I think that they had Carlton had a ridiculous advantage, and yet, and also with inside 50s, and yet lost the game. And part of the efficiency we've been missing, I think, inside 50 is just, again, the imponderable of how do some players, and I'm thinking of Ben Brown, suddenly start kicking accurately again. When he looked like a few weeks ago, he looked like he was almost done, couldn't kick to save himself, and couldn't mark and couldn't lead. And suddenly he was leading, and we were passing to him. We seemed to start to honour his leads. And I thought that made quite a big difference to where we go. And when we come into this final series, I think efficiency and ability to kick the goals you have to is going to be really, really important. And it makes me a bit nervous because we don't know how we can't predict that. It's one of those unpredictables. Max Gawn, Ben Brown a little bit, and a few of the other guys, some weeks miss them and some weeks get them. But on the ball side, interested to know what you think. I mean, I don't know whether that week or two off for Ben Brown fixed a couple of physical things that were putting his kicking off, or what's going on with him. But he looked much more like the 2021 Ben Brown, and I think it's going to make a big difference to us. And just interested what you guys think about, how did we suddenly switch it on so well when it had been missing for quite a few weeks? And also with the ball movement, obviously.
That's the $6 million question, Bim Man. I hope you have the answer for that, because I certainly don't know.
Wow, I feel like that's a Dorothy Dixon, really. Yeah. But it's like, I mean,
it is.
At the risk of repeating myself, is that the model is all about a particular way that the Ds want to play, and that's that running in waves. Is when we're up in our best and at our very best, we are running in waves. And again, I really like the coverage. So if you happen to watch the replay again, there's a lot of high shots that they've done and a lot of down the ground shots, and you really see right from the very first bounce to, particularly that first half. That wave running, the swarm that I talk about, like multiple players, 4 or 5 players running parallel with the ball. The ball gets to a contest and a stop, and suddenly we've got 3, 4 players, and they've only got 2 at the ball. At one point, I did that last night. I froze it when I watched the replay. We had 5 players in the first half at a contest. They had 1. It was incredible. That whole team, whole swarm running is what the model is, and all season Goody will do it, and it won't work, but he'll keep doing it because the importance is you don't move away from the system. And the answer to the question is because 3 weeks ago, we weren't close to we were closing in on our optimal physical readiness. We're pretty close now, I suspect, and we'll probably be even fresher and closer to our optimal for the qualifying final. But you take the example of Ben Brown. It's because he's gone through a heavy training program, volume and intensity from around about round 10 for 2 full months. And then progressively, as we head towards the final, they start tapering 4 to 5 weeks, keep the whole team up at an optimal level from this point through to the grand final. Tricky thing to do, but that's what we're attempting to do, and it's looking very much like last year. I've talked about the mirror of last year. Even this game was incredibly similar to the Geelong game in the sense that the penalty was big for both teams should they lose. It was huge for Brisbane. They fell out of the top 4. We got a top 2 and a nominally a home last year, but home this year. So, the short answer is it's all about the loading program and the periodization training program to be more accurate. And we're closer to our optimal fitness, and we saw it. And that's what the other teams have to get to. And the other teams, Carlton and Collingwood and Sydney, will all at their optimal fitness for the last 6 or 7 weeks just to get to this point. So we'll see a completely different performance when we play Sydney as we played them last time. And if we play Collingwood again, the same is true there.
It's time. Anything else?
No, it's a really good point. And I think it's a bit of a testament. Well, it's an interesting one around all these close games that Collingwood have won, which clearly show their fitness, late in games. And I had a little bit of a look actually at our performance in last quarters this year compared to last year, because I felt that we'd dropped off a fair bit. What would be your predictions on how you think we went last quarters this year? And I think that was a reflection on, we've done the same loading. Yes, we had a harder draw this year, but I thought we'd started to lose. We had 6, 7 games where we were, I think in almost all our losses we were winning by 20 plus points, and then one way or the other faded out. And I actually had a look at that. Any predictions on which year was a better year, or how we've gone? How much worse, how much better?
Who wants to take that one?
I suspect it's a trick question. I suspect it was last year. The last 8 games of the season, last 6 games of the season, it's been chalk and cheese about who we've played. I mean, we've played essentially 3 final games in front of big crowds in the last 4 games. So we lost 3 games really. Doesn't compare to Brisbane, to Gold Coast in an empty Marvel Stadium. West Coast over there, and there's no comparison really. Geelong in an empty stadium as well. So
and Adelaide at the empty
and
MCG.
Adelaide, yeah. So, but yeah, I know. I mean, the numbers. I'm guessing it's time that we've not travelled as well in the second half this season, or at least in the back half of this season.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really interesting because, it's remarkable that our percentage is within 0.3 of last year. Our 0.4 were only 43 points more on the entire season than last year, and we're 40 points. We've conceded 40 points more on defence. So, differential of 3 points in total between the two, just unbelievably similar to last year. And on the final quarters lost last year and this year in the first 10 rounds we lost 3. In the second 10 rounds, we lost 7. So we lost 10. We lost 10 last quarters this year, but 7 of those in the last. But then, as you say, for what it's worth, obviously we had a much harder draw in the second half of the year. Last year we were again so close. It was 2. We lost 2 last quarters in the first 10 rounds, which is pretty remarkable because it was really only around the mid stage that it looked like we were really starting to become a contender and we were playing very good football. Quite a few of those first games, the first rounds, we didn't play particularly well last year, but we only lost 2 in the first 10 last year compared to 3 this year. And then in the second half last year, we lost 6 of 12, and this year we lost only 7 of 12, which arguably... it's a better performance given the level of opponents faced. But it's also
and those
just
numbers marry up with. Those numbers marry up with so many of the parallels to last season. Even the ladder finishing position and the way we finished, it's so very similar. There's so many. Obviously, it should come as no shock given Goody's philosophy is so much about repetition.
Yeah, and I think that the run-in we've had in the last 5 weeks is probably going to put us in really, really good stead in terms of managing, finals like pressure already. We're pretty used to that, whereas Geelong, on the other hand, have had such an easy run-in. I don't think that's going to help them very much, I hope. But, anyway, just a few observations. I like your suggestion around... I've always said... in my mind, there's a good Melbourne and a bad Melbourne. And good Melbourne run and bad Melbourne don't. And it's sort of, what you're saying about when we're doing well on the ball movement. I hadn't particularly thought about that at this point. But, why weren't we doing that against Carlton? And, but then if we kick straight on it in a few of those.
That's the thing. That's what I
although
don't like about not taking into account, because it implies it's a psychological weakness of some sort. That turn it on, turn it off, flick the switch, all of that nonsense is just nonsense. If we ran out of gas against the Pies, we ran out of gas against the Blues. You don't have to be a sports scientist to see it. You can see it with your eyes. But if you don't factor that in, the only other explanation is somehow we're mentally variable from week to week, which I just reject as a sort of thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree. I mean, I'm sure you're right about the loading, but I don't think that it goes as long. I don't think it's going to affect it as deeply. It's certainly we pulled out of it last year a bit earlier. So I don't know. Anyway, the Carlton game, we should well and truly, loading shouldn't have been an issue by then, and we really struggled with our ball movement, and we certainly switched it on, obviously against Brisbane. So fingers crossed that that's going to be proven to be where we sit now, and it's not a reflection on Brisbane. It's actually a reflection on us freshening up, and we're in really good stead if we continue it. Anyway, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
As always.
Thank you very much. It's time. Really appreciate the call, and we'll speak to you soon.
Okay, cheers. Have a good one.
You too. That was It's Time. So we'll go on with the question. I'm going to skip a couple. So apologies to Engorged Onion and D Knox. Did have some good questions, but I am going to move it on because that sort of relates to some of the things we've already talked about. I don't want to go over things over and over again. Altona Demon asks, have we shown our hand too early? It was clear from the game that the D's were playing a different style of attack, going to forward 50 and also exiting defensive 50, which you've sort of alluded to, Big Man, already. Shock Horror may kick to different points of the ground, often to Langdon's wing. On numerous occasions, entering forward 50, we took the dangerous inboard kick into leading lanes vis-a-vis our usual mode of operation, kicking into the forward, into the pocket for contests. Does this help or hinder us, or was it a good chance to give it a hit out before we deploy the similar style against Sydney? Look, I'm not an expert in this, but I guess if you are going to have some type of plan B, you do have to practice under match conditions rather than training conditions. So if that is a thing, then I guess you do have to try it in games. So what are you waiting to tip your hand? You're going to have to show it at some point. B-Man, what do you think?
No, I think that 100%. Again, just got to look at last season. We did stuff in the finals that we didn't do in the home and away, and we'll do the same thing again. I'm sure Goody would have preferred not to tactically show his hand, but they made it very clear that they desperately wanted to win this game. They didn't shy away from the fact that it was critical to finish top four. They said that in the lead up to the game. They talked about the fact, apparently, a big theme of the week was that, your point, Andy, that they haven't been out of the top four since the beginning of the last season. They made that a theme of the week. They played this game for keeps. As I say, I reckon he would have preferred to keep some of that tactical powder dry. One of the really interesting things that I heard, and I forget now who said it afterwards, is one of the players, or perhaps it was one of the coaches, saying that Melbourne can win in different ways. And so in this game, we had really high numbers for Melbourne for scoring from the back half, and really unusually high for us. And it's like suddenly that's an issue that Brisbane have to deal with. Suddenly we're scoring goals from the half-back flank, not just from turnover. But we can come up against another team, not score any from the half-back flank, and score from turnover. So I think you'll see that there'll be plenty of tactical tweaks, nothing major, but some change-ups that he'll bring into the finals. Plenty of them. He's clever the way he does it. He'll keep his tactical powder dry until he needs it. He needed it on Friday night, and he used it. I have no doubt he'll do the same come finals.
I'd just like to add there. Sorry, Andy.
No.
You'll see little tactical tweaks in every game, but I think the real concern for other clubs who are facing us in the finals is this was Melbourne running it over the ground at their very best. It was frightening what was coming from those halfback flankers and the defensive structures in place. This was Melbourne as we played in the grand final in the third quarter last year at absolutely our best, and they're going, how in the hell are we going to stop this?
Exactly, George. That's the thing. It's like, exactly, like what tactics do you employ against that?
Yeah.
Because the only tactic you can really employ against that is to have players fit and fast enough to run with Cozzy for 150 metres up the ground, back, up and down. I mean, look at that. One of the play that started with Ben Brown coming off the bench, running, sprinting to the back line, marking it at full back, the ball going up the other end. I mean, what teams can... You have to be able to run with them. That's what Geelong have made it clear, is that when Scott was talking about their loading during that period, he was talking about the only way we're going to beat Melbourne. That's what his subtext of what he was talking about. That is what tactics can you do it? It's like the game against Freo. The talk was, well, couldn't they move the ball quick? That's what they like to do. We stopped them moving the ball quick. Brisbane like to move the ball quick. We stopped them moving the ball quick. If we play Collingwood, go for their lives. Go for those kicks down the corridor. We will carve them up.
Stu says, the kick to players leading towards our goal was used very successfully. This allowed the forwards to stay inside 50 and then lead up to the player with the ball sitting 70 to 80 metres out. It's not commonly used by any teams and seems to be a point of difference we might employ in this final series. You guys,
I thought that was a really interesting question. I saw it on the thread because I went back and looked at some of the goals. A lot of them were set up with exactly that kick. There was a beautifully weighted kick to, I can't remember, maybe it was Hibberd, or Swallow into Petrarca, where he marked on the half-forward flank and then kicked deep. And then we're at that 60-70 forward. I thought that was, that was one of the tactical tweaks, actually, I thought, because they were looking for that, the 70-metre hit. So, yeah, that was a really interesting question. The one thought I did have about it is that it's not dissimilar to what Geelong do with Cameron, who not quite the same, but he runs back towards the goal and they look to give it to him up around the 60-metre mark, and then he's running inside. That's a bit different because generally they don't have the forwards coming at them, although Hawkins is deep. So, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting one, and I'll go back and look at the goals to check that out, but that they did seem to be kicking to that half-forward line quite a lot and weighted some beautiful kicks in there too, I must say.
D Minion says, Petrarca seems to be playing a bit of time in the forward line in the past few weeks. Are we saving him to be unleashed in September? Is it to give Gus more midfield minutes? Does anybody have the time forward stats for Track in the past few weeks? I'm not complaining as he's managed to hit the scoreboard twice. Do you think we are saving up a Track to be unleashed more into the midfield in September, because he is playing a bit of time up forward? What do you think of that strategy, George?
I think there might be confusing the fact that Petrarca is in the forward line with what's going on. It started happening a couple of weeks ago where the rotation, I think it's mainly because we haven't got that second tall at the moment available to us in the forward line. The mids rotation goes through the forward line. So you'll see Swallow, Brayshaw, Sparrow, Swallow. Yeah, we're back.
B-Man's.
Back to it. Sparrow, Brayshaw. You don't see Oliver there. He usually goes to the bench, I think. Viney, or all resting or coming off the bench as part of their rotations. First place they go to is that forward line. So, they are spending a lot more time, whereas previously I think the rotations were going basically off the bench for the mids, but they're now rotating through that forward line. So we're seeing more time for Petrarca. Certainly in this game it worked very well while he was there. So we'll probably keep playing it, but I don't think you're saving Petrarca up for the finals in particular, because there are plenty of others on the side that they got to worry about as well, not just him.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a little bit about the tactical tweaks, isn't it? Because, again, I think Goody's a much underrated coach on the tactical front, and he uses these pieces really cleverly. And I think, Track has been spending a bit of time up forward. I think part of that is to do with his fatigue and some issues that maybe he's been carrying. But in this game, it made a lot of sense because it exploited their defensive weakness so well. It really messed with their ability to cover players. And it's interesting, just going back to Stu's point about that 70 metres kick. It was Petrarca a couple of times, and then that's a great spot for him because if he kicks deep, he's kicking, 70 metres, he clears easily, doesn't he? So he's such a good kick from a field kick off one step, Petrarca. He's such a dangerous player anywhere, but he's terrific to watch up forward. And that goal he kicked, the banana was just so calm and casual, wasn't it? So I'd rather him doing that kick than a set shot. So it's interesting how they'll play him in the finals. But again, it's a bit like the Gawn and Jackson conversation, because suddenly he can play 50-50 forward, Petrarca, but in a big game he can, and maybe that's what the opposition are scouting for, and they're going to work out what they do with Petrarca, and suddenly you could go 80% midfield and only 20% and be just as damaging in the midfield. He's a phenomenal player to watch. I love watching him play. But yeah, it's an interesting the way they have played him in the last 5-6 weeks up forward.
Couple of minutes on Cozzy, if you could, gents. This is from D. Zephyr. 15 goals in the first 11 rounds, 23 in the last 11 rounds, with 18 of those 23 coming in the last 6 rounds, which arguably was the hardest part of our fixture. Not many of us have seen finals at the G since 2018. If he carries this form into September, us Melbourne supporters will be in for some type of treat. He's been sublime. Now, last year he kicked 40 goals, 28 from the 25 games. In 20 games this year, he's kicked 38 goals, 15. So he's 2 less goals. He's 2 goals away from what he kicked last year. So he's on track for having a better season in terms of goal kicking this year than he did last year.
Yeah, he's just remarkable, isn't he? He's that X factor that you need, particularly when you're going into finals, and we've seen it in this game and the previous game as well. When you need someone to pull something miraculous out of the bag, he's capable of doing it. And like Jackson, you've just got to remember the guy's 20. He's just remarkable. What he's people were making the comparison with Cyril Rioli a couple of years ago when he first started in terms of his style. Well, he's starting to produce the same sort of output in terms of hitting the scoreboard as well. So, yeah, he's fantastic. Don't underestimate as well, like in this game in particular, he ruined Daniel Rich's and Brisbane's chances completely. Rich needs the space to be able to kick long, particularly up the corridor. Cozzy was onto him right from the very start. He's limiting him, forcing him to do short kicks, completely ruins their game structure and game tactics simply because he puts the pressure and the work onto those type of players. So, yeah, he's a very vital part of it. I hope his bandage around his knee is doing its job, because we can't afford to lose him out of the side.
And I love how good he is on his left foot. I mean, and the same with Melksham. To have 2 players in your forward line who can kick so well on their non-dominant foot is just such a bonus. He's such a clever footballer. Speaking of the Cyril comparison, what he's got all over Rioli is how fit he is and what a runner he is. Like, he is phenomenal. Just watch him run. If you watch some shots of this game, is how often he's up deep in defence and he gets back. He must be a serious, athlete in terms of his running ability. His pressure that he provides all over the ground, not just in the forward line, is impressive. And as we've talked about often, probably the thing I most like about him is his footy IQ is just completely off the charts. It's a bit of a cliche to say he's a natural footballer, but he's a natural footballer who is thinking ahead of where his opponent is. So he always seems like he's got an advantage on him. And there's Ginnivan has kicked 38 goals too. He's an excellent player, Ginnivan. I really like him, but Ginnivan doesn't, for instance, have that ability to get up the ground at a fast clip and get back. That's the thing. Good, Cozzy can run 150 metres up the ground at good pace and run back at good pace. That's going to stretch almost any opponent, and that's what I was saying about Cameron. Cameron doesn't do that. Cameron just doesn't provide it. If he's not kicking goals, he doesn't do enough, whereas Cozzy can have a fantastic match with 4 or 5 possessions. it's nice though, Andy, though, when he's kicking goals, isn't it?
It certainly is. In Cyril's first 3 years, he played 64 games and kicked 72 goals. So far in Cozzie's first 3 years, he's played 59 games for 81 goals. So he's played 5 less games than Cyril and kicked 9 more goals so far than him. So
and
he's on
all of that pressure and the running and he's critical not just to our forward structure, like Spargo and like all of those players. He's critical to our all-10 defence. And you cannot untangle those two things. And just on Cozzy, how much did you love that banana? I mean, I was so confident he was going to get it. I don't know why, because that's a 30-70 shot at best or a 20-80 shot at best, isn't it? So it just never looked like missing.
He'll light up.
I had the misfortune of listening initially to the match on the ABC, and they had Jason Ackermanis commenting on that. And as he's lining up for that kick, he sort of said something along the line, there is absolutely no way that Cozzy can get this. He's already run 150 metres to get to there is absolutely he's kicked it. The original sort of foot and mouth stuff from Ackermanis, not surprisingly, but he couldn't believe that someone could put that much work into getting there in the first place, and then to finish it off from that distance was just remarkable.
That's such a good point about like to be able to be that fatigued and run that hard and still be able to execute. Hunt did a similar. He didn't execute in the end, but he was on the end of a chain that he kicked inside 50, and he got it deep in the forward. He started the chain deep in the opposition defence and ran the length of the ground, muddled up the last kick in there, but just phenomenal running.
I can't wait to see Cozzy light up the G in September, full crowd. It'll be a sight to behold. El Diablo, we're going to get to we spoke about this before the show, your premiership metrics question. You want us to dive deep into it. I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that next week when we do our finals preview, so we will get to it. We are on top of it. Lazy wants to know, and maybe this is also a question for next week, is it dangerous to be jumping the gun on how we potentially fit T-Mac back into this team? Without going too much into it, can you see if T-Mac passes it all and ticks all the boxes, does he get into this forward line? George?
I think it'll be a very big ask to get T-Mac back into the side. Apparently,
forget the fitness aspect. If he ticks all the boxes, I'm saying.
If he ticks all the boxes, I think it's going to be very difficult to tick all the boxes. Is basically the bottom line.
Would you not even have him sit in the forward line?
The other option, and you've only got to look at the emergencies for this week. Joel Smith was named as the other emergency. I think Joel is closer to getting a run than T-Mac at the moment.
It's an interesting question, because if we were talking about this 3 weeks ago, it would be, how could you imagine not having T-Mac in there? But such has been the performance of Melksham. He's done his job. He also, against Carlton, was taking contested marks up in our forward line. So
kicked 6 goals.
4 goals. 3, it would be huge. It might come down to matchups. It depends who we play, and if for instance, if it's against Geelong, they might feel they need the extra tall to, they've got a tall defensive system. They've got an excellent defensive grid they use. So maybe it will come down to matchups. Whereas, for instance, Sydney, if it was in 2 weeks' time, it's not going to be them. But if it was Sydney, their defence isn't as tall, for instance, and, is probably not as needed against them, maybe against Geelong. So, but Smith is a viable option too. But, I suspect, I've said all along that, I thought they'd go with a second tall. Maxi is definitely playing that second tall sort of role in terms of bringing it to ground. George's point's a good one about him not being a natural forward, but, we know Goody, he backs the incumbents in, and he's, I guess he makes the tough calls. I think Jordan's the other one. I mean, it's going to be tougher on Jordan not to get back into that team than T-Mac.
2 years in a row. I mean, he got the medal last year, but I'm sure he wants to be playing.
So at this stage, it's hard to see, isn't it? It's hard to see, but it might be matchups and, there's time.
Well, we'll know more probably when we talk next week because he is playing a practice match. They're going to get limited time at Casey, so we'll at least see how he's running and how he's moving, and that might give us a better indication to answer that question next week because I'm sure it'll get asked by 17 people before then, including ourselves. So we've got a bit of a spiel on the finals preview. The footy gods smiled on us this weekend. All the results went our way, ensuring that we netted the coveted top 2 spot on the ladder. We didn't go back-to-back in the minor premiership stakes, but no one ever remembers the minor premiers. We ended up with 16 wins and 6 losses with a tougher draw than last season that netted us the 17 wins, 4 losses and a draw. In 5 of our 6 losses, we led at one stage by around 4 goals, and in the Cats game, we got to within a goal with about 10 minutes to play. There was only really one blowout, and we had some mitigating circumstances in that block of 3 that we lost in the mid-year. When you look at the breakdown of each team in the top 8 in regards to who they played, the D's have played 11 games against the other top 8 teams with 5 wins and 6 defeats, whereas the other top 4 teams have only played 8 games against other top 8 teams. Cats and Swans are at 6-2 and Collingwood are at 3 wins and 5 defeats. Factor in the Cats also playing North and West Coast twice, and we're not far off that minor premiership again. We play the Swans this week. If we win, we head straight to a home preliminary final at the G. Prospective matchups include Geelong, Collingwood, Fremantle or the Bulldogs. A loss to the Swans means a matchup at the G against Brisbane or Richmond, and then it's either out in straight sets or a date with either Geelong or Collingwood in the preliminary final, also at the MCG. In fact, you'll be happy to know that the top 2 position and the position of other teams in the 8, in particular the Victorian teams, means that all of our games in September will be played at our home at the MCG. In general, guys, are you happy with our finals matchup this week and the outlook on the road to a grand final and a potential back-to-back premiership? B-Man, I'll start with you.
This time last year, we were talking on the eve of the finals, in fact, leading into just ahead of the round, about the stats that Joey Montagna was talking about on First Crack about the record of teams that finished second. And that, in fact, teams finishing first in the last 20 years haven't had a great record.
So now we'll listen to the statistic.
Yeah, exactly. When we finished first last year, well, there was an asterisk because there was a break before the finals and there was all of that palaver. But now, back in a normal season, I'm going back with the second is the place to finish. So, in all seriousness, thinking back to this time last year, we're all hopeful. I was pretty confident, but we didn't know what was coming. Obviously, there's inarguable we're in a better position this year. We're not travelling interstate. Last year we didn't know where we were going to end up being. We didn't even know in a hotel.
We didn't even know if the granny was in Perth yet, did we?
Exactly. We didn't know what was going on. This year we know. Now we are not leaving Victoria. How great is that in terms of their ability to plan going forward? We've got games on our home deck, including this week. I'm pleased that we're playing Sydney in this first game. I wouldn't have been concerned if we were playing Collingwood particularly, but it just means that it's not going to be full of it's going to be easy to get a ticket for a start. So that's a good thing.
Tomorrow, 10 a.m. for members. But
we haven't played Sydney, so I'm really pleased with the way it's panned out. Obviously finishing second is huge. It was statistically very unlikely that the Saints were going to give up a 56-point margin. So again, going back to what I was saying before, I think you put up there, Andy, if they'd scored 50 points in Kilda, they had to win by 51 points, and for every 10 points more than 50 that the Saints scored, it goes up. It almost doubles, doesn't it? So that double their score essentially. So I'm super pleased. In my perspective, we know that we can win a flag. We know our best is good enough under pressure. Goody's been talking about our ability to perform in big games this week. He hasn't said a peep about that all until now. We're tracking great. We've got a full list to choose from. Even T-Mac is likely to be at least available, better than last season. We're fit firing. We're staying at home. It sets up beautifully.
George?
Nothing much more to add to that. I was certainly barracking for the Saints. I just said in the game against Sydney, because Sydney could have easily
At one stage, it looked like they were going to roll them.
The job. And every time the Saints kicked a goal, I thought, that's beauty. That's worth more than a goal.
Right. Exactly, that's worth more than a goal.
They got a couple in a row.
Points. Yeah. So,
and they got a goal in the last 30 seconds or the last 10 seconds of the third quarter, which I was mighty relieved. And King couldn't miss.
Yep.
5 straight.
So we took it all. But at the end of the day, we did what we needed to do. Yeah. That's all we can control. And we did it very, very well. We finished second because this year we were either the first or the second best side in the competition. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, the ladder told the tale, didn't it?
Yeah. Geelong probably got the run because of a favourable draw as usual, and we've had to basically play a number of finals before we've even got to the finals against top 8 sides that others in the 8 haven't had to play. So we're beautifully paced. Things did fall our way. That's nice for a change compared to previous years, and it certainly helps out Andy's MFCSS, of course.
No, it didn't. Not over the weekend. I was nervous about 10 matches instead of the one.
Yeah, but imagine if the results had gone the other way.
Oh, yeah.
What did you say Collingwood's record was against top 8 teams?
It's now like, their record against top 8 teams is 3-5, and 2 of those wins are against us.
Yeah, right. So given 2 of them against us.
I don't know who they.
Certainly the first one we're in a heavy training block, but the second one we weren't optimal. But given they won 11 straight, it was 11 straight, wasn't it? Given they won 11 games straight and 3-5 against top 8 for a team that's finished 4th, and for their percentage to be just north of 100%, that's, I mean, all power.
Well, look, they've won 13 games by under 12 points.
It's, unbelievable. It's really, you can only give him credit for it. And I've just loved the way McRae's responded to it all. He's just been a total breath of fresh air, I reckon. So I'm pleased for Collingwood. They're exciting to watch. But 3-5 is a concerning number if you're thinking about playing Melbourne or Geelong, and you're not even 50-50 against other top 8 teams.
Be interesting. Well, we'll go into a bit more depth next week about the finals. Maybe each of us will take a team that we think is our biggest threat, and we'll do go a bit more in depth, as well as going over, giving a more in depth preview of our match against the Swans. Casey Demons suffered their first defeat of the season in their final round matchup against the Lions in Brisbane. Despite this, the Demons still ended the season 3 games and percentage clear on top of the ladder. Coincidentally, they will also face off against the Swans this week and will have a massive home ground advantage by playing out at our fortress at Casey Fields. Jacob Van Rooyen kicked 4 goals and James Jordan had 27 disposals in the 14-point loss to Brisbane. George, you did watch the game. Anything you want to impart about it?
Yeah, it was a very un-Casey type of game that was played. It was played up at Red Rooster Park, of all the names, up there in Moreton Bay, apparently. It should have been called Turkey Park, based on, firstly, the commentators during the game, and secondly,
he was barracking for the quarter I watched.
Yeah, it happened for all 4 quarters, but just for our listeners, we had 3 new recruits in this game, according to them. We had Henry Smith, Alex Chandler, and James McDonald was back playing again. So,
Junior.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But he was wearing number 23. That's why.
James Jordan.
That's why he got that name. The other thing was, if people think the Herald Sun are any capable of football reporting, they put a report up not long after the game, which emphasised the huge Melbourne defeat of 29-17, 191 to 10 points for the game. and probably praised all the Brisbane players for their magnificent effort. Trouble was that was the score for the Werribee Bull Ants game.
Including pumping up Robinson for his ability to be sub and coming out and destroying
he
us.
played for 5 minutes in the Brisbane game, and they made such a big deal that he played 2 games. Well, he didn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, he was.
And it looked like crazy eyes after he hit it, after he kicked that goal. It was like, Jesus, you feed that fella.
Well, because that was the crowd. I've never heard a crowd go so crazy for a sub who's come on to kick a goal. They absolutely love him there.
Yeah. Anyhow, the quality of journalism has certainly dropped in the country, as evidenced in this game. It was a gusty game. Not really, the wind was not really favouring either end, but so it was really inconsistent around the game. It was very Casey-like, as I said. They were missing Jimmy Munro for a start in the middle. And I think that made a huge difference in terms of ball getting ability. Dunstan, for example, only had 14 disposals, and Mitch White only had 15 in total for the game. Brisbane are a good side. They win this game, they finish second, which they obviously did. So between them and Southport, second, third was on the line, and they did very well with this. And obviously a good number of Brisbane listed players playing for the side. JVR was a real standout as far as a forward. 4 goals. Took an absolute screamer of a mark in the first quarter to score a goal. Really first-class game all round. They put him into the ruck for a short period as a replacement for Bell while he was resting, and did a great job in there. But it wasn't just the rucking capabilities; it was his follow-up and ground actions. Even when he was put into that role, it looks like we're not going to get to see him this year. But he was a real standout. Probably either first or second best out of the Melbourne players. James Jordan played very well, 27 disposals, really stood out. So he's keeping his hat in the ring. Smith was very strange. He had 5 disposals in the first quarter and looked fantastic, and then only had a total of 11 for the game, really dropped off quite considerably after that. But that seemed to be much the same for the rest of the side. They just weren't up to their usual standards for whatever reason. Once again, Corey Ellison down the back line was magnificent. He will be picked up in this year's draft without any doubt. He's just too good for VFL level to stay there. So, so it was an interesting game, but they finished up on top of the ladder, 3 games clear. You can't ask more than that. There was really no need to probably... apart from the kudos of going through the season undefeated, there was nothing on the line for Casey in this game. So maybe they just said, we'll have a bit of a rest this week in the lead up.
Sorry, I was on mute then. We've also got AFLW coming up. Playing a grand final rematch, I believe. And from what I heard today, I think the venue has been moved to Glenelg. I'm not sure where it was before, George.
Yeah, the game's on Friday night, so keep an eye out for that. It was originally programmed for Norwood Oval, but apparently there's been too much rain there and the ground's in really poor condition, so they've moved it to Glenelg Oval. I've got no idea what that means in terms of an oval. At least the Norwood ground's the Redlegs ground, so that's a good start, but that's not available now. So, it'll be interesting because, like I said last week the other week in the practice game against Carlton, and Carlton are no monkey sort of side. We won them by 70 points. Teams don't score 70 points, let alone win by 70 points, and they absolutely poleaxe Carlton. So, we're looking very promising, even though we've still got those injuries to Gabby Colvin and Eliza McNamara, unfortunately. So the rest of the girls looking really top nick. It'll be interesting as a first up against Adelaide, who only lost a couple of players. I think they lost 2 players to Port, Erin Phillips and one other that escapes me. So they'll be down a little bit in terms of talent from what they had available to them in the grand final, but it'd be interesting to see how much we've improved this year. And listening to Daisy during the week, the girls are really keen to avenge what happened in the grand final. So I think it'll be a great game to start off the season.
I wonder why they're not, if they're moving the game and there's no finals, obviously, in Adelaide, why they didn't move that to Adelaide Oval. But we'll never know. Thank you to RPFC, Nairobi Demon, Lord, Nev, Lefty, Adelaide, Bigfoot, Demon WA, Denox, Altona Demon, Stu, D Minion, D Zephyr, Lazy, and El Diablo 14 for your questions. Thank you to our voicemailer AF. Thank you to our callers, that were Murdoch and It's Time. Thank you to my co-hosts George and B-Man, and most importantly, thank you to our loyal listeners. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week to preview our qualifying finals match against the Swans, as well as our preview of the 2022 final series. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!
Come on, demon. Come on, demon.